Welcome back, everyone, to That Amazon Ads podcast, where today we have yet another Amazon PPC debate on the topic of should you limit the number of keywords per campaign? We have two exciting and influential guests who are very active on LinkedIn. You've probably seen them around, and they are taking opposing views. I will allow them to introduce themselves and explain their point of view. But we have Keith Mander, who is going to be essentially defending the viewpoint that single keyword campaigns in all contexts are best. And then Elizabeth Green, who will be discussing her point of view, which is essentially that it depends and that you don't always need to limit the number of keywords per campaign, particularly down to a single keyword level. So I don't want to go any more detail into that, lest I butcher their points of view. And so we'll give them a chance to introduce themselves in just a second here. But Andrew, how are you doing today on this fine morning?
Doing wonderful. Really looking forward to this debate. This is a hotly contested topic, one that has been going through the space like wildfire. Should you limit your campaigns to 5 keywords, 10 keywords? Should it just be single keyword campaigns only? And how do you find that mix? So really excited to hear these two experts' point of view on this and really settle the debate.
Yes, and it's a long overdue topic too. This was when we were first planning out this podcast and PPC debates. This was like one of the first things we listed as a potential topic, and it just took us a while to get to it. So I'm very excited. And we are recording on Valentine's Day. So thank you everyone for taking time away from your loved ones for this one. I don't have a loved one, so for me it's not an issue. It's just me and my dog. But we don't do anything special on Valentine's Day. So but yeah, thank you to everyone else. And let's start off. I will let Elizabeth introduce herself, just give a quick 30-second introduction for anyone who doesn't know, and then we'll let Keith do the same. So Elizabeth, welcome. Happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, I do have a significant other. We're going on 15 years this year in June, so been a hot minute.
Ooh, very nice. Congratulations.
Thank you. But yeah, so hey, my name is Elizabeth Green. I'm one of the co-founders of an Amazon ad agency, which is why I even hope I'm qualified to talk about this topic. Been doing ads for a hot minute now. We help high 6-figure and then 7-figure brands who have a very clear, defined vision, and they lack someone either internally or their partner who knows how to build a custom ad strategy that's going to help them execute on that vision. So that's where we come in. It's our bread and butter. We love getting knee deep into it. Let us worry about the ads, and you guys just tell us what you want to happen with your account. So as far as Stephen actually said it pretty well. My point of view on the topic is definitely an it depends. And I do recognize that for anyone who's getting into Amazon advertising or starting off their journey, or even brands looking for answers, an it depends answer is kind of like a non-answer. So I will concede that, in that, if you have a no more than 5, or, as Keith was saying, like single keyword campaigns, which I'm really interested to hear like his take on why he does that across the board. It gives you a very clear direction, right? It's cut and dry. You do this in these circumstances, and that's how it goes, which is helpful to have that. But what I found over the years is that there are certain qualifiers or ways that we go about thinking it. So it's not just a blanket, it depends, and let us worry about the nitty gritty, and I'm not going to tell you kind of our thought process. I'm definitely interested to kind of sort of explain how we go through things and we think about when it comes to like how many keywords should you be putting in campaigns.
Love it. And Keith, why don't you let the people know who you are? Elizabeth's actually been on our podcast before, so you might be new to some people. So yeah, let people know who you are and what you do.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the pod. I don't normally appear in podcasts or have a kind of a public name. Sometimes I'm a bit of a keyboard warrior on LinkedIn. I can't stop myself from chiming in on a topic. But generally speaking, my bread and butter is just selling on Amazon. So I'm a seller myself, have been for 9 years, I believe. I actually only sell in the US marketplace, despite being based in the UK. And yeah, I'm a little bit unique to some sellers, I would say, in that I have a bit of a technical background. So I can't code whatsoever, but have an appreciation for what can be done with technology. And so early on in my Amazon selling history, I hired a developer just to build out internal tools to help us manage the core product business. So building tools to do customer service, inventory management, 3PL management, keyword research, and so on and so on. And essentially, we just kept them in-house to help bespoke for our needs. But some of them we have kind of spun out to make available to other sellers or done custom projects. But all of that gives me this perspective of kind of being hands-on and getting my hands dirty. So PPC was something I didn't really touch for a while because it was a quite technical challenge to get into. But recently I have. And so I've been just trying to nerd out on it, develop some of our own tools and software to act out our own kind of worldview on PPC. And so single keyword campaigns is one of those choices that we made with our own kind of application of our software. So yeah, I'm quite gung-ho on that.
Yeah, and Keith, you and I have gone back and forth a lot on very, very technical levels, especially in terms of, we were talking through like the bidding algorithm for Ad Labs and kind of what your team's been doing. And I will say, I didn't necessarily agree with all those points of view. There's some really interesting stuff that I'd love to discuss more in detail at another time, definitely out of the scope of today's topic. But certainly you've got a good head on your shoulders and you think through things very technically. And so we're excited to hear you present your point of view. And with that, let's ring the bell and we'll have Keith kick us off defending why he thinks that single keyword campaigns. I said I just want to clarify that wasn't a Freudian slip of me trying to say what Andrew and I's opinion are. We'll refrain from any sort of opinions. We'll maybe do another episode if people really want to hear our opinions on it. But yes, we'll let Keith defend his point of view. So let's ring that bell.
Round 1.
So ultimately, I think it's down to control. So a bit of a refresher for those who don't know. If you want to have bespoke custom placement modifiers or budgets on a keyword level, you could say, then it has to be acted out at a campaign level because you can't make those settings at a keyword level. So by virtue of having one keyword per campaign, you effectively give that keyword level control. And I would say there's a clear-cut need for that with these high volume, high importance keywords that may perform differently. So you could have keyword A that performs better on top of search versus rest of search, and keyword B vice versa. So if you were to lump them together, you would lose that capacity to refine and tweak the placement modifiers. And that all applies as well with budgets. It's lesser of an issue in my perspective because generally speaking, I run ads on a kind of, let's say, ad efficiency basis. So usually bids are a throttle of control and risk and exposure on a keyword rather than budget. But there is different worldviews on that for sure. So placement modifiers is probably the number one use case where you'd want that granular control. And that matters for high volume keywords. I would say for other keywords that probably don't have enough volume and data, maybe it's kind of a moot point because you might not actually enact those kind of placement modifiers because you'd have a lack of data. But I would say if you then still bundle things together and then a keyword were to all of a sudden kind of spike in volume, then it becomes a little challenging to uncouple it from that kind of grouped basis to become a single keyword campaign. It's easily done, but there is kind of a little bit of like handwork to make it happen. Plus, you could also argue you lose a bit of like the history behind that keyword if you're kind of moving it from one location to another. It's a bit debatable, but potentially. So that's another point. I would say at this point as well, like a common thing I would hear from people that don't like single keyword campaigns is that it makes their account a gigantic mess, right? You have all these campaigns galore, right? But I would say at this point in time, it's pretty much a necessity to use software to some description to manage your account. So software can handle that kind of volume. And so I don't think that really, really matters, especially if you're kind of doing things like hourly bidding or something like that. You can possibly do it by hand, and even things like bulk sheets would fail at that point. Placement modifiers are too complicated to do by hand in Ads Manager because the maths there is quite complicated. So yeah, you basically need to use software, and that has no problem working with hundreds, thousands of campaigns if that's how many you have. I think also the likes of Search Query Performance Report, Brand Analytics have shown that the number of keywords actually move the needle is much less than people realize. So it might not actually be as vast in terms of the number of campaigns as people might fear. The other point, I guess the final point maybe, is campaigns are also a form of reporting abstraction, right? So bundling things together also helps you see aggregate data, which may then help with making decisions on what to do with that bundle of keywords. But I think there are other ways to solve that low data problem that doesn't require bundling things together with the pitfalls that has. So that can be done in software in a different manner. So yeah, I think the arguments for bundling things together can be eroded. The only one point that I think Elizabeth may make, or if I were to argue against myself, is if you are bundling things together, it generally means that you are the type of person who is interacting with your ad account more frequently. And I think being hands-on, getting your hands dirty, is always a better thing than being overly reliant upon software where you can just become a bit lazy and separated from what's going on. So being in the weeds can be helpful. And so having these kind of bundled campaigns can result in that need to be interacting with it more often. And I'll stop there.
I love it, Keith. That was great. Thank you for sharing all of that. I have about 50 different questions coming out of that intro, but I'm going to hold off. I'm going to let Elizabeth state her case. Go ahead.
Yeah. So first off, I would say I 100% agree with Keith when he was talking about the distinct advantage of single keyword campaigns is about the control. I would 100% agree with that. And I do want to preface this by saying I am not opposed to single keyword campaigns. And also Keith did a fabulous job for me in kind of laying out my counterpoint. And that was my main counterpoint really is the amount of complexity it adds to your ad console and the difficulty in doing analysis within the ad console. Now, we use software as well. We also leverage bulk sheets, and I put out a lot of content around that. And I was just going over our account this morning with my account manager. We were very deep into our analytics tool, and we were doing a lot of analysis there. But then actually that analysis ended up inside of the ad console for the ability to view things very granular, like the history tab. To see what changes were made and to catch things that potentially could have been over optimized. And so because we are doing such granular and really deep analysis, we find that a lot of times Campaign Manager is our final place that we'll end up because of the ability to see things over time, to dynamically change the date ranges inside of the search term tab and be able to view sort of what has happened over time on a search term level, or to go back and reference history because the history tab actually goes back a very long way. So even if you're keeping a record of changes within whatever software you have, it can be really beneficial to have sort of that also as a backup to reference, changes and then graphing the results of those changes inside of Ad Manager we find very helpful. So I do agree with Keith again on wanting a very high amount of control over major keywords, specifically rank strategy keywords. And that is a strategy that we deploy consistently across all accounts and all brands that we're managing, is if we intend to aggressively spend and aggressively try and dominate a particular search, I would always advocate for a single keyword campaign because your ability to control things from a budget level, from a placement percentage level, as well as a bid level is very helpful. Where I differ, and then again, this comes back to doing a lot of analysis in the account, I think, as well as sort of a two-pronged, maybe like a double-edged sword when it comes to budget control on, the campaign level and having that sort of filter down to a single keyword. Sometimes that can be difficult if you're dealing with a particular product or you're dealing with a particular account where they have very distinct and are defined and then very low ad budgets. It sounds like he's like really sophisticated in what he's doing. And so I'm sure the strategies he's running in his account and as a brand owner make 100% of sense. But we do run into those scenarios where there's this specific product line. There's maybe, unfortunately, maybe in a total account where like I cannot afford to spend more than X on this product line account, etc. In those cases, there's actually a distinct disadvantage to the dispersion of ad budget in single keyword campaigns because, say, for example, we're testing 50 keywords across, a product. Again, if ad spend is low, you probably should narrow in those tests, but maybe we've defined 50 keywords we want to create a test on. If our ad budget for that particular product is, say, $25, well, if these are all single keyword campaigns, the lowest ad budget I can allocate to these is $1, which is a potential daily budget of $50, which is double my ad budget. And I'm left with no choices here. Versus if I have maybe a couple campaigns, maybe I have some single keyword campaigns for my main targets, but maybe I've grouped my lower value targets into another campaign. So maybe I'm allocating $15 of that ad budget to my main keywords, and then maybe the resulting, $10, I say, well, maybe I can perform some limited tests, and I have that control over a lower budget because of the groupings of the keywords in those campaigns. And so I would say that there is some advantages in grouping there. And then just a quick point when it comes to analysis, one thing that we find very useful is bucketing targets to help make sense of two things, either the source of the keywords. So a distinct example would be if we scraped a bunch of ASINs that are ranked on our main term. We like grouping those things, and we might pick out one or two high value competitor products to target, with kind of single targeting campaigns. That would be a good workflow for us. But maybe everything else that we're simply testing, if we're grouping that into a campaign, we can use campaign naming structures to define, I am testing this is a bucketed group of ranked competitors on X term, which is a little bit hard to distinguish if you're simply looking at a list of ASINs or you have a single ASIN. Now, you could do this across single keyword campaigns, simply copying that naming structure somewhere. That would be a use case. However, you still would have to use a search function within Ad Console, and you would have to make 100% certain that every single person and every single campaign had the exact same naming structure. Sometimes it's easy to put additional space. Someone uses a slightly different acronym here, and all of a sudden your search function breaks down, and those two additional campaigns that someone added the extra dash to are no longer visible in your search. And so it's kind of easy to lose things sometimes. So we'll group things that way in terms of, again, source or potentially strategy. So for a very common one for us to group in, and maybe even group quite a few keywords in, would be if we have a very distinct low bid strategy. Our strategy is tightly controlled at the bid level. Our spend is tightly controlled at the bid level. We're not as much reliant on budgets to help sort of cap any spend allocations here. And for us, again, if I have 50 targets that I have a low bid strategy, I'm expecting half to get impressions and half not. And that kind of goes with the name of the game of the strategy. Well, then if I'm grouping them, that creates one campaign within my ad console, which again, I can distinctly view looking at the campaign naming structure and knowing the strategy that's around that grouping versus creating 50 different campaigns, which, could potentially clutter. And then again, half may get impressions, half not. And that's, again, kind of roped into the strategy.
Love it. Awesome. Excellent beginning, just overviews of each person's point of view. For the rest of this episode, it's just open discussion. So you two just feel free to go back and forth. Feel free to jump in and interrupt each other as well. I think it creates entertainment for the audience. And then, like I said, Andrew and I, we may chime in with some additional questions just as we help guide the conversation, some questions that we anticipate the audience would be asking. So with that said, Keith, I'm sure you probably have a couple things to respond to here.
Sure, yeah. A lot of it makes a lot of sense and makes me realize, well, I do actually spend a lot of time in Ad Console jumping around between campaigns to get to the history tab, and it is a pain in the neck. So the more campaigns you have, the more fiddly that becomes. I think, I always have this rationale that software will save the world. So I still think, those types of problems can be solved in software. And I suppose some out there already do a job of logging history and making that more accessible. And an honorary plug, of course, for Ad Labs is probably one of the best tools I've ever seen in terms of doing very quick searches, and then it can aggregate data, and providing you've got good naming conventions, then you can very, very quickly aggregate data based on kind of like bundling things together, even if they are across multiple campaigns. I think, a good feature request, perhaps, I don't know if Ad Labs has got this already, but or on the roadmap, would be the ability to kind of add tags based on things that come and go in terms of like, here's a keyword that's a part of a current launch technique or strategy. Here's ones, we want to keep our eyes on, or something like that. That would be really useful because precisely if you just have thousands of campaigns, you could just easily forget that. And so I've constantly writing things or just copying and pasting links to a particular page within Ad Console, and then putting it in my task manager to come back to in 2 days' time. But this is still a really inefficient way of doing it. I hope to do it in our own software at one point in time, but it's kind of a lower priority item. So all of that history stuff and tagging things, I think it makes a lot of sense. The budget problem is just something I'm not familiar with, and when you describe it, it makes a lot of sense. I run ads on this kind of ad efficiency basis. So basically, the budgets I have on my campaigns are $10,000 a piece, and I wish to spend that much, right? So I've dialed in the bids so that they match my target ACOS. So I want to spend more, but the bid is the limiting factor. And so budgets are irrelevant to me, but that's just how I run my ads because it's my own selling account, right? So obviously that's going to differ if you're managing a client's account and they just have a very fixed budget. And if it's low, then spreading that across many campaigns is going to falter. So that was quite interesting to hear about that.
Yeah. I mean, I could cross the aisle and give you another argument, seeing as, the way in which you manage what I think it sounds like a valid one. You're obviously gotten great results. So I appreciate Stephen and Andrew putting together these discussions because, it really, I think, helps grant different perspectives because there's more than one way, I think, to go about what I think this conversation proves very well. But one distinct advantage, this is getting more into budget conversations than it is the amount of keyword conversations. A argument for a single keyword campaign, primarily when it comes to using it for a major ranking keyword or a major ad spend investment in a particular search domination, is the distinct advantage to be able to cap the budget. Which I think that's another debate right now. And should you cap budgets? Should you not cap budgets? Are they always on? As Keith is very much dialed in his bids. We've actually been achieving some really insane total ACOS control results, specifically through very sophisticated levels of budget capping, which has been interesting. And I actually had a very interesting conversation with Mike Freaky from Perch. He's, kind of heading their ads over there. And our conversation revolved around that sometimes bidding, adjusting the bids to control spend could be detrimental to the strategy if the market is so competitive that a low bid does not make you competitive in the ad auction. And then you're definitely left between a rock and a hard place saying, okay, I know I want to rank on this search. I know I need to invest in this search. And yet, if I keep my budgets uncapped and keep a dominant bid, I'm going to be spending thousands of dollars a day on this single keyword at a cost level that doesn't make sense at a completely uncapped version. One sort of a strategy to hopefully having your cake and eating it too is to keep a higher bid and then cap the budget at a level that allows you to maintain enough order velocity through that keyword to make a dent in your search page rank, but does not put so high of an ad spend cost on it that you're eating into the total A cost. So the A cost of that campaign will be high, but as long as, your order volumes in the organic outpace and, can support what you're doing with the ad spend, you can still end up with very profitable total A costs running that strategy. It's definitely a balancing act. So it's definitely a test and adjust act. But again, I know I'm kind of arguing for your point, but I definitely see the validity.
No, it points out a flaw actually in my current setup is that we generally just have a target A cost, a blanket target A cost for a particular product. That is a reflection of its product margin. So if the product margin is 30%, my target A cost is 30% because I'm happy to break even, to drive volume. Hopefully I'll make a little profit, but break even is just fine. But there would be obviously keywords where I'd be happy to lose money because they fulfill a greater purpose, right? So that could be achieved potentially with setting higher kind of artificial target A costs on a set of keywords. So that's one kind of workaround. But I know of a school of thought, which I think is really fascinating. Probably what you're alluding to is like you can also single out keywords where you really just don't care about A costs almost, but you just want to hit volume, right? So one way that you can even like dial this in is to look at search query performance reports and blend that together with brand analytics reports. So then you can actually see the absolute number of clicks and sales that the top 3 ASINs get for a particular keyword and what you get. And then you can make up the differential with unprofitable PPC and use budget as a way to kind of hit that goal on a daily basis. So you can reverse engineer everything. Your conversion rate on that keyword, how many clicks you're going to need to get the number of sales to then match the top 3 ASINs in that particular market for keyword. So you can just dial it all in and adjust it every single day using a combination of kind of bid and budget, which is, really fascinating. But then you're really getting nerdy on all that kind of data and bringing it all together. But it does make sense because you're giving Amazon the signal of you deserve to be in the pack, right, of the top products ranked on a keyword because you have similar metrics. You're driving the similar kind of volume and reliability of conversion rate, click-through rate, etc. I've not really got up to that level yet, but it's worthy of experiments for sure.
No, I think it's very interesting when you can start pulling out things, which again, hear me arguing for you again. But having everything already in a single keyword campaign probably already sets you up to be able to make very fast movements on something like that. So I definitely can see the validity of doing things that way. Yeah. One other thing, now that I'm thinking about it and in grouping keywords and then going back to what I had said before about having very limited, having a limited budget to be able to do. The other thing I'm thinking about it, not just only with limited budgets, but again, what we've been doing is a lot of very intricate, like I said, budget adjustment rules, which again goes back to the should you always have budgets on, should you have budget off, but looking at not just the keyword level and then making bid adjustments, but sometimes we find when you're adjusting bids, the amount of time that it takes to sort of reach that equilibrium and optimum bid can take time. And within that time, depending on how that campaign is performing, that could lead to maybe a little bit more, I wouldn't necessarily call it ad waste. I hesitate to use that word because it is, it's a testing phase. It's not as if you're getting nothing for it and it needs to happen to be able to reach the optimum bid. But what we find is sometimes if we can group keywords and then as we're performing those bid tests, use budgets as a lever to essentially say this is how much ad spend given the average performance of not just the account, we also will optimize things on, say, a per product level. So given that this particular product is maybe well within targets, A cost and total A cost, we're perfectly happy to maybe run a little bit more aggressive tests because, the current performance can support that spend versus there will be some times where maybe due to stock fluctuations, maybe conversion rate takes a hit, maybe it's in a launch phase and so there's all kinds of testing being done. Maybe we have less solid numbers in our ACoS or total ACoS metrics. And so any amount of fear and potentially detrimental strategy to like go all the way in that direction. But at the same time, you know, again, the performance just can't support a high amount of testing budget at that point. So again, leveraging budgets on, say, groupings of test keywords can allow you to, in some ways, limit the amount of budget you're allocating toward those tests. Again, a little bit easier because things are grouped versus spread across multiple campaigns.
Yeah. It sounds like a kind of damage limitation throttle, right? When you're doing that learning. Yeah, I think like the low data problem of Amazon ads is probably the greatest challenge there is, and probably worthy of many long debates, because it's a really tough one. And Amazon altogether for the ads is remarkably simple, right? So it's just picking keywords and bids, but outrageously complex when you start getting to these problems of kind of low data reliability, and just all the variables that kind of interplay with each other.
Yeah.
So I had a bit of a question. I had a question for you, Elizabeth, based on your experience with the agency, because I think what you mentioned, it must be hard for very many agencies where, you know, you might want to push on some keywords that makes them quote unquote unprofitable, right? But they serve pushing the product up, and you're looking at tag costs instead. But those conversations must be really tough because, you know, they just got to look at the numbers from the ad reports and be nervous.
Yeah. I will chalk it up to now I'm at a level where I can say no to who I don't want to work with. And we're really enjoying working with brands who understand that ads fit very holistically into their business, which it sounds like you're very well aware of. So we are conscious of that. We do have a couple clients where all they're looking at is ACoS, and some of them, unfortunately, especially in the beginning, you know, when you're starting out and you're maybe working with brands that you have to do a little bit more, maybe coaching through the numbers, is if a brand is solely focused on profitability, I would highly recommend looking at total ACoS versus ACoS numbers. Total ACoS is going to relate much more to your profitability than ACoS will. ACoS tells you how profitable the ads are. Total ACoS says how profitable is my account and when factoring in ads. That is probably a simple way to put that. And so it is entirely possible to have unprofitable ads and highly profitable account. And the number that actually will determine if that is or isn't possible is actually, we call it your ad sale percentage. So it's essentially your ad sales divided by total sales. The question here is what percentage of my total sales is coming from ads? And then sort of the thought process there is that if the ad sale percentage is high, the majority of my sales are coming from ads. If my ad sale percentage is low, then I have very good organic placement. And the higher your ad sale percentage, the closer your ACoS and total ACoS numbers will be to each other. The lower your ad sale percentage, the farther apart those will be. And to your point of, you know, pushing ads to gain rank, to be able to be more profitable and to make more sales, and where is that balance between profitability and, you know, ad performance? It really comes down to that. It's looking at the ad sale percentage and saying, is this falling into numbers that we deem are potentially scary down the road? And can we push on the ads to make that number go down? And that means, as much as it may sound counterintuitive, because typically the ads will have to be break even or potentially somewhat unprofitable in certain levels to be able to do that, you can in fact actually push the account towards greater profitability, greater market share, greater sales growth, if you're willing to go through that. And so thankfully we work with a lot of brands who one, either trust us very much to be able to like help coach them through that, or two, are very aware of the dynamic themselves. And then again, just trust us to know where to pull the levers, because that's where our job comes in. And then, you know, it makes it for a good partnership.
I'd like to jump in with a question for Keith here. So on that topic of the low data problem, I have a little bit of a two-pronged question here. Number one, and you started talking about this a little bit at the very beginning, but about the keyword harvesting and how that actually works, how that actually looks like. Because in traditional best practices, at least what's the most popular method is, you have your auto campaign, or that's doing a bunch of research. You're a no auto campaign ever, Keith?
Oh gosh, no. Not.
Oh man.
Oh, pains me.
Yeah, we seriously, Keith has so many really interesting ideas. We're going to need to have you come on for a lot more debates, or even just as us, maybe just me and Andrew versus you on talk on some of these things. But
So wait, 1 second,
Yeah.
1 second. Keith, you only use exact match? Is that all you use, or are you using broad and phrase at all? Or
Oh,
just
no.
just exact?
That's just,
Interesting.
yeah.
Okay.
Pure
Which
exact,
isn't even
no
exact.
auto.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's
yes.
true.
That you and I can
Yeah.
get mad about.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. Just wanted to clarify that because I was curious if that was like solely exact match single keyword campaigns, or if you were still kind of mixing in a little bit of that, research aspect of things. But good to know. Go ahead, Steven.
Well, let me just try to add on the second part of the question. It's also around that low data problem and harvesting potentially lower search volume keywords that only get searched or one click like a month. Do you have criteria for do you have any kind of threshold or cutoff? What's your single keyword only harvesting criteria? And then also if you could speak a little more detail into how do you try to bundle those problems for the keywords that only ever get one click a month?
Yeah, so it's an interesting thing because it's something I'm really trying to tackle at the moment, and it's beyond my comprehension. So I've had to use, ChatGPT to help, and my engineer who's far smarter than I am. So in terms of the harvesting part, firstly, so essentially we just get our keywords from Amazon through Search Query Performance Report and Brand Analytics, Product Opportunity Explorer to some extent. And so you got that first party data that allows you to skip the need to discover it, right? So you can already find out what is driving sales in the market and just repurpose that. Now, we have run auto as a way to kind of validate our theory. And for sure, it will still generate search terms that were not on our radar. But they are really minor, low volume keywords that would never really move the needle. So I would just make the case that the cost of discovery doesn't justify what can be found, right? The value that you could get out these new keywords. So yeah, we're just essentially just copying and pasting data from Search Query Performance is the primary tool as a way to figure out what are the keywords that matter and to keep our eyes on new keywords that might pop up. And a lot of that's driven by things like auto suggest, right? So the top 10 keywords that kind of pull down when the customer begins to search really are the keywords that matter in a particular market. And that can change over time. So it is definitely something you want to keep your eyes on in terms of new keyword opportunities. And I just don't trust Amazon. That's another major factor, right? So I've done auto campaigns where it'll just spit out a term like kitchen. That's it, kitchen. And it's just rubbish. I mean, they want you to spend more. I know it's a bit like conspiracy theory-esque debate, but it's really, they are way off sometimes. And the same happens with product targets as well. So that's how we do the harvesting part. And in terms of the low data problem, the way that we're trying to wrestle it at the moment is looking at a combination of keyword-specific data and aggregate data. So if a keyword has low quantity of data, then it will lean towards looking kind of upwards to more aggregate data for that advertised ASIN. And as more data arrives, that keyword, the ratio of what data is used will start to switch to a point where it's potentially using 100% keyword-specific data. So it's this kind of blended bid idea. And that prevents this issue that you have with low data, where let's say you have 10 clicks in one sale, and then the 11th click is another sale. All of a sudden, your kind of appreciation of that keyword will dramatically improve, and a standard simplistic bid algorithm will say, yeah, let's just give it a bigger bid. But really, you just don't know. With such a little amount of clicks and sales, you just haven't got a clue. So leaning towards that kind of aggregate data, which is averaged over other keywords for that advertised ASIN, I think makes sense to just settle what you're bidding on a keyword until you collect more data. I think there's still risk that you're underbidding on some keywords that still deserve it and it's not getting exposed. It's a problem. What else is a problem? There might be a way to even do it more smart where you're looking at contextual similarities between keywords, the actual semantics of the words. And so that you could actually group things together in a sense based on similarities and then give bids that are based on aggregate data of similar looking keywords. But yeah, that's the crux of it and something we're rolling out at the moment in our own campaigns.
Awesome. Elizabeth, did you have anything to follow up on that? If not, I was going to throw another question your way.
Oh, feel free to throw the question. I would have leaned into the exact match because that's not something that we do, but that's an entirely separate debate. So I don't know how far we want
I know
to
go. Would be a very interesting one. We'll have to revisit. So last night, around midnight my time, we got a question in our Discord group, and it was very timely in anticipation of this episode. And by the way, both Elizabeth Green and Keith Mander are members of that Amazon Ads podcast Discord. So it's our free online community where anyone can come in and ask questions. Andrew and I are very active in there, giving away free advice, free wisdom, as well as other active members in the community chiming in on these conversations. So get in there if you're not. But the question was, how many keywords should we limit to each campaign? I've heard some say 5. I've heard some say 10. Now, this is kind of in the vein of what we're discussing, but I think typically the rationale here is that people say if you have like 100 keywords in a campaign, you're going to see that Amazon only gives impressions or like the majority of the clicks to just a few of those keywords. And so therefore people have observed seemingly their experience has been if they like kind of segment these out into smaller chunks, whether it's only 5 keywords per campaign or potentially just 1 keyword per campaign, that they have seemed to experience that they get better volume. So Elizabeth, I'd love to hear your point of view on that, just in general, limiting, maybe not necessarily even going down to a single keyword campaign level, but just in general, limiting the number of keywords per campaign. What are your thoughts on that?
Personally, just like the way this question was phrased as, is it 5 or 10? Those are the answers.
Exactly.
Those are not the only answers. And I do have a very tongue-in-cheek, hopefully I'm not going to sound too condescending to say, but I've been around in this industry long enough. So for those of you who know, the amount of keywords Amazon allows you to put into a campaign is 1,000. I don't recommend putting 1,000, but there is a limit. What is the limit? There is a limit. It is 1,000. I don't recommend that for the purposes of budget control and all of the arguments that Keith made about, being able to pull the levers that matter and really get good ad performance out of it. But people asked this question 5 years ago, and the answer was, well, don't put more than 100. And then 100 became 50, and then 50 became 20, and 20 became 10, and 10 became 5. Why? That's my answer.
And 5 became 1.
Why? Like
I've been saying 3. I've just been going around LinkedIn. Anybody who says anything about adding 5 keywords, I said, actually, the new system
definitive
is 3.
answer
3
is
works
3.
best. Don't ask me how. Don't ask me how I know, or there's no way I can prove it, but it's 3.
And I do understand when you're starting out and you're trying to figure out, like, there are so many things that, Keith has been describing very complicated issues with data and we're dealing with shopper behavior here. Whenever you're dealing with consumer behavior and then attaching data to it, it's rough. And there's all these things, like there's these intricacies that we puzzle over ad nauseum, and you're stepping into this world and trying to make sense of it, and it can feel as if you can't touch the bottom of it. So getting a definitive answer of no more than 5, if you are trying, I would, if you're struggling to even comprehend, what is a good bidding strategy, I would put that sort of puzzle through and thought dedication to the bids more than I would say, use 5, it's fine. So I don't have an issue with using a definitive number. So in case it's like, oh, it's 1, and for someone else it's 5, and for someone else it's 10, and that works. I think the most annoyance I have with a definitive answer is when I give the answer, it depends. And for those who would like to, like in this forum, Keith's been very gracious, like, oh, that was an interesting concept. It's brought in my idea of, oh, that's how you do it, and that's how Keith does it, and that works well. Let's have this interesting discussion. But when I get questioned on that somehow my it depends answer is invalid because someone else gave a definitive number, I think that's where I get kind of pissed off, if we're being honest and open here.
Sure, but Elizabeth, oh, sorry, I want to clarify one more thing, and then I'll let Keith speak. You said you could go up to 2,000, but you wouldn't recommend it. If you saw an account, if you were auditing an account, and someone had a campaign with like 1,000 keywords in there, would you tell them that they need to further break that down and segment that out to have at least fewer than that, or would you say still if it's kind of doing well, you would let it go?
That's a good question. And this gets into a little bit more tactics, but if you want to break down a campaign for anyone listening, I would not move the things that are working. I would pause the things that are not working and move those. To Keith was saying about the campaign history, and there's potential that something in its original campaign, if moved, doesn't always perform as well. You can circumvent that by keeping all the good stuff in the original and perhaps renaming it and then moving all the other stuff, which is a really good process. It's a little bit more tedious to do, but it's very useful to do. So I would say my argument for anything and my sort of benchmark that's behind the answer to it depends is it's about how much control do I need to have on a campaign level to be able to enact good performance on these targets. So if I have, say, 1,000 keywords, there's going to be some of those that are phenomenal. They might be my keywords that should be single keyword campaigns because the amount that I want to invest in them is substantial. And I might have other keywords that are running well above my targets, and I do not want to invest heavily in these because it makes no sense from a performance perspective to do so. So in that case, I would say, yes, I would recommend breaking it apart, but it's not because of the number of keywords, or it would be more, again, about performance and control metrics than it would be a strict number.
Would you say that you get better performance on campaigns that have less targets in them or more, or does it not vary at all?
You can get better performance with less targets because of the incremental levers that you have available to you to tweak the performance of that keyword. So for example, placement percentages. If I'm doing very well top of search and I have the ability to enact a top of search adjustment on a single keyword that I know is performing well top of search, then my performance of that keyword is going to be greatly improved by me having the ability to control those levers. It doesn't necessarily have to do anything to do with the number. It has to do with control, particularly budgets or, the dynamic in bidding strategy, placement percentages, budgets.
Very well said.
Cool. Okay. I'm sorry, Keith. I cut you off a few minutes ago.
No, it's all right. So yeah, I guess echo Elizabeth's point there, really, that I think underpinning the question on Discord there was there's probably other things you should be worrying about, essentially. It is a minutia point that, has importance, but there are a bunch of other things you'd probably look at first, primarily the actual keywords that you're bidding on, broadly how well you're managing bids and paying attention. And then you can go into the details of kind of how many keywords per campaign. It does matter, but there are other important things. And at some level, some things just don't matter as much as we nerd out on, probably. But the answer is definitely one.
I love it.
Well, we're going to start bringing this conversation to a close, and I will give you both an opportunity to provide your final summary, as well as let people know where they can find you to get in touch if they would like to learn more about you, your business, what you do. But I did have one additional question for Keith specifically, and then Andrew, I'm not sure if you've got a final question too. I'll let you. Okay. So, Keith, something that I have observed in my accounts is that, let's say you have one keyword with like a 5% conversion rate and another keyword with a 10% conversion rate. Now, if I'm looking at those, and let's just pretend those are both single keyword campaigns, if I look at the relative performance between the placements for those two keywords, even though one's getting a 5% conversion rate in total, the other's getting a 10% in total, at top of search, they both get maybe like a 30 or 50% improvement from like their total baseline versus other placements. So the point being, the relative conversion rates, like those deltas, those spreads across those different placements seem to be pretty similar, which to me indicates a little bit more that like these are more just average behavioral trends around these types of stuff. But I haven't yet gone super in depth in this into, a massive, single keyword campaign test. I don't have a ton of data like that. So I'm curious if that is something that you've considered, and I guess here's the reason why I ask, because that's part of why, to me, it's okay to group keywords together in one campaign and have them being governed by the same top of search adjustments, is because if they're both doing 30% better at top of search, you can just increase for top of search by 30%. It doesn't really matter that one keyword has a lower conversion rate than the other, because they're going to get their own independent bids. But then the actual campaign settings that apply to both will be evenly applied in a way that makes sense, because the relative performance is different. Does that question make sense? You see where I'm going with this?
I think so. So maybe like any good politician.
Yeah, and I guess my point is, if you haven't done this yet, I'd be very curious, and I can connect offline and think through this together. But I'd be very curious to see, since you have individual single keyword campaign data, I'd be very curious to see what's the average conversion rate differences between placements for each individual keyword. How wide is that spread or that standard deviation between those jumps in conversion rates, those deltas across different placements? Because if it's a very wide range across all these individual keywords, I think that's a strong point for doing more single keyword campaigns to take advantage of those features.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think you guys have put out really good content about revenue-based bidding, right? And that's ultimately how we manage that problem. So yes, conversion rates vary per placement by virtue of the placement, right? If you're low on the page, it just has a lower conversion rate, but it may have a lower cost. And so what you're looking at is the net of those two factors, which is the revenue per click. And then we're multiplying that by the target cost, and that arrives at the bid that we want for that particular keyword on each of the three placements. So it's already managed in that way. But yeah, I think there is worthy further analysis. But you have to think about that one a bit more.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I would love to maybe if you would let me, I'd love to get a sample of your placement reports data and run some analysis myself to see what I find. But yeah, thank you both so much for this whole coming on here and having this conversation. I'll give you both a couple of minutes to kind of just wrap up your argument, just kind of your point of view on everything. And then lastly, just let people know where they can find you, whether it's if you want to plug your LinkedIn, your company website, anything like that. Elizabeth, we'll start with you, and then we'll let Keith wrap us up.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree a lot in part with Keith, and I think we both hold the belief that it is about, at the end of the day, a lot of budget control and the amount of control needed. Obviously, I think there is some use cases in which being able to govern multiple targets with a single budget control has validity in certain circumstances, and I think it can also offer benefits in circumstances as well when it comes to kind of grouping and making sense of things inside the ad console. I definitely agree with Keith in that there is a lot of things that software can help you make sense of or manage, but I think there's still something to be said for being able to get your hands dirty and make sense of an account as well as leveraging software. So kind of giving yourself the best of both worlds. Yeah. So, and if anyone wants to get a hold of us. Yeah. Best place if you're looking to work with us would be the website, so jungler.com. We offer ad audits. So if you're like, oh, that sounds interesting, what does she think of my account? Is there something that maybe you would adjust here? I'm more than happy to take a look for you. The best place to reach out to us is the website, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. So I think it ultimately comes down to control. I have kind of desire, I guess, for software and a very scientific view to win the race. But I think Elizabeth's totally right. In the end, I'm also in the ad console way too much, digging around, trying to understand it, and still using my noggin to kind of decipher the code. So in the end, it doesn't really matter all too much. But for some keywords, it does. And I think it's a good starting point, right? To figure out where does it matter to have single keyword campaigns, and then to enact it there. And then the rest is a little more, there's other things to worry about. So don't get wrapped up in it, I think is key.
Awesome. Well, very well said. Thank you both so much for coming on, sharing your knowledge and expertise with everybody, with all of our community. We super appreciate it. For those of you listening, if you disagreed with any of these points of view, you can hop in our Discord and let them hear it, let them have it. And we'll be happy to join in on that conversation. So jump in there. But for now, that's it. We'll see you next week on That Amazon Ads Podcast.
See you guys.
See ya.